Girl waves to veteran at Walmart. Military instincts. Sense something off, so he takes action. You ever get that feeling in the pit of your stomach? Like something's just off? That nagging sense that tells you to pay attention, even when everything seems normal on the surface. For Rick Dawson, a retired military officer in his late 60s, that instinct had saved lives more times than he could count. But this time, it wasn't on some distant battlefield. It was right there in the middle of a Walmart parking lot. What started as an ordinary shopping trip with his wife Margaret quickly turned into something far bigger, something life-changing. And it all began with one small gesture, a little girl waving at him. Rick and Margaret weren't the kind of couple who craved excitement anymore. Their days were filled with quiet routines, grocery runs, doctor visits, and evenings spent watching TV together. Life after retirement had its own rhythm, but Rick still carried the weight of his years in service. His posture was straight, his movements deliberate, and his eyes always seemed to notice things others missed. Margaret, on the other hand, moved slower these days. Her hands swollen from arthritis, but she faced every challenge with quiet determination. They made a good team, balancing each other out. That Friday afternoon, they'd driven to Walmart for medicine and groceries. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so they thought, as Rick pushed their cart through the aisles, scanning the list of items they needed. Something caught his eye. A young girl, no older than 6, standing near the toy section. She had blonde hair and wore a cute Hello Kitty shirt, clutching a figurine tightly in her hands. Beside her stood a man, crouched down, talking urgently. At first glance, it looked like any parent trying to reason with their child over a toy. But then, something about the scene didn't sit right with Rick. Maybe it was the way the man spoke too sharply, or how the girl's face scrunched up, not just in disappointment, but fear. Whatever it was, Rick couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. He decided to approach them, thinking maybe he could lighten the mood. "Sweet daughter you've got there," he said warmly to the man, nodding toward the girl. The response was immediate and hostile. The man snapped back, telling Rick to mind his own business. Taken aback, Rick backed away, chalking it up to a bad day. But as he walked off, snippets of their conversation reached his ears. "Come with me," the man said. "We need to go. Don't you want to see your new home?" New home. Rick glanced back, watching as the man took the toy from the girl's hands and ushered her away. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but the look on the girl's face said it all. Confusion, sadness, and maybe even fear. Rick tried to push it out of his mind, focusing instead on picking up Margaret's medication, but the image of that little girl lingered, gnawing at him. He found himself wandering back to the toy aisle, staring at the very same figurine she'd been holding. Without really thinking, he picked it up and added it to his cart. A silly impulse, sure, but it felt like a small act of kindness in a world that sometimes felt colder than it used to be. Little did he know that tiny toy would become the thread tying him to a much larger story. When Rick finally returned to the car, Margaret immediately noticed the tension in his expression. "What took you so long?" she asked. Concern etched on her face. Rick hesitated, unsure how to explain what he'd seen, or rather, what he thought he'd seen. How do you tell someone you're worried about a stranger without sounding paranoid? Still, he shared the details with Margaret, who listened intently. By the time he finished, her brow was furrowed. "That does sound strange," she admitted. "But what can we do?" Just as Rick was about to respond, movement near the store entrance caught his eye. There they were, the man and the girl, heading toward a car parked at the edge of the lot. Without thinking twice, Rick called out, Excuse me. His voice was lost in the noise of the bustling parking lot. But the girl heard him. She turned, her face lighting up with recognition, and waved. Rick waved back, approaching them cautiously. Holding out the figurine, he smiled at the girl. I saw how much you liked this earlier, he said gently. I thought you might want it. The man's reaction was anything but grateful. His face darkened, and he grabbed the girl's arm, pulling her close. I told you to stay out of this, he growled at Rick. This is none of your business. The girl looked up at the man, her earlier smile replaced by fear. As they walked away, Rick overheard the man mutter, Your new home is waiting for us. We need to hurry. Those words hit Rick like a punch to the gut. Who talks about a new home like that? And why did the girl look so scared? Back at the car, Rick wrestled with what to do next. Should he call the police? Would they even believe him based on such vague suspicions? Margaret watched him silently, sensing the storm brewing inside him. Finally, she broke the silence. If you think something's wrong, we should check it out, she said firmly. Her words gave Rick the push he needed. Grabbing his phone, he dialed 911, explaining the situation as calmly as he could. The dispatcher promised officers were on the way, but by then, the man and the girl were already gone, disappearing into the sea of cars. Determined not to let it end there, Rick made a decision. With Margaret's support, they followed the pair, staying far enough behind to avoid detection. The chase led them to a remote gas station near the Mexican border, where the man parked and hurried inside, leaving the girl alone in the car. Rick's heart raced as he approached the vehicle. Through the window, he saw her slumped in the seat, unconscious. On the console lay a bottle of cough syrup, its label barely visible. In that moment, all doubt vanished. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was a full-blown emergency. As Rick called 911 again, panic rising in his chest, the man reappeared, arms loaded with supplies that sent chills down Rick's spine. Duct tape, wet wipes, a prepaid phone. The pieces were falling into place, painting a horrifying picture. When the man spotted Rick, fury flashed across his face. You again, he snarled, pulling a knife from his pocket. Last chance, old man. Move, or I'll make you regret it. And that's where we leave things, for now, because what happens next will change everything. Will Rick's instincts prove right? Can he protect the girl before it's too late? Stay tuned to find out how this everyday hero stepped up when it mattered most. Rick's mind raced as he stood face to face with the man, his military instincts screaming at him to stay sharp. The knife glinted under the relentless Texas sun, its blade catching flashes of light that seemed almost mocking in their brightness. Rick's body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring, ready for whatever came next. He'd spent decades training for moments like this, split-second decisions, where hesitation could mean disaster, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of what was happening now. This wasn't some distant battlefield. It was a dusty gas station near the Mexican border, and the life of an innocent little girl hung in the balance. The man snarled again, taking a step forward, but Rick didn't flinch. You don't want to do this, Rick said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through him. His words weren't just a warning, they were a promise. If the man made another move, Rick would stop him, no matter the cost. Behind them, the faint sound of sirens grew louder, slicing through the tension-filled air. The kidnapper's eyes darted toward the noise, panic flickering across his face. It was clear he hadn't expected anyone to intervene, let alone someone like Rick. As the standoff continued, Rick's thoughts drifted back to earlier that day, to the moment he first saw Chloe in the toy aisle. She had been so small, so vulnerable, clutching that figurine like it was the most precious thing in the world. And now, Here she was, unconscious in a car, drugged by a man who clearly had no regard for her safety. Rick clenched his jaw, anger bubbling beneath the surface. This wasn't just about stopping a crime. It was about protecting someone who couldn't protect herself. That thought alone fueled him, pushing aside any fear or doubt. Meanwhile, Margaret sat in the car, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold from afar. She wanted desperately to help, to be by Rick's side, but she knew better than to interfere. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as she whispered prayers under her breath. Over the years, she'd learned to trust Rick's instincts, even when they led him into danger. But this was different. This wasn't a controlled environment or a planned mission. This was raw, unpredictable chaos, and it terrified her. Still, she forced herself to focus, scanning the area for anything that might aid Rick if things went south. Her arthritis may have slowed her down, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Back at the center of the confrontation, the kidnapper lunged suddenly, swinging the knife wildly. Rick reacted instantly, sidestepping the attack with precision, honed by years of combat training. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it sharply, forcing him to drop the weapon. The knife clattered to the ground, skittering. Out of reach, the man howled in pain, struggling to wrench free. But Rick's grip was unyielding. Years of discipline and strength held firm, even as sweat dripped down his forehead and his lungs burned from exertion. For a brief moment, the two men locked eyes, and Rick saw something there he hadn't expected. Fear. The kidnapper wasn't just angry or desperate. He was scared. Scared of getting caught. Scared of failing. Scared of Rick. Just then, the wail of police sirens reached a crescendo as multiple cars screeched into the gas station, tires kicking up clouds of dust. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands that echoed across the empty lot. "Police! Freeze!" One of them barked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The kidnapper froze mid-struggle, his defiance crumbling in an instant. Defeat washed over his face as he sagged in Rick's grip, all fight draining from him. Rick released him slowly, stepping back as the officers moved in to take control of the situation. Handcuffs clicked into place, and within seconds, the man was subdued. His head bowed in shame, but Rick barely noticed. His attention was already on the car, on Chloe. As paramedics rushed to her side, he felt a wave of relief wash over him, though it was tinged with lingering worry. Was she okay? Had they gotten to her in time? These questions swirled in his mind as he approached cautiously, not wanting to crowd the medical team, working tirelessly to stabilize her. One of the paramedics glanced up briefly, offering a reassuring nod. "She's breathing, but weak. We need to get her to the hospital right away." Rick nodded, stepping back to give them space. His eyes lingered on Chloe's pale face. Her blonde hair fanned out against the gurney. She looked so fragile, so small. A surge of protective emotion welled up inside him, stronger than anything he'd felt in years. He'd done everything he could to save her, but now it was out of his hands. All he could do was hope and pray that she'd pull through. As the paramedics loaded Chloe into the ambulance, Rick turned to Margaret, who had finally emerged from the car. Her expression was a mixture of pride and concern, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around him, holding him close. For a moment, they simply stood there, drawing strength from each other. They'd faced countless challenges together over the years, but none quite like this. "You did good, Rick," Margaret murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved her." Rick shook his head. still processing everything that had happened. I just followed my gut, he admitted quietly. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Turns out, I was right. He paused, glancing toward the ambulance as its doors slammed shut. But this isn't over yet. Not until we know she's safe. Detective Martinez approached them then, his demeanor respectful but focused. Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson, I need to get your statements. This guy's got multiple IDs, drugs, and tools for trafficking. It looks like we stopped something big today. All thanks to you. He gestured toward the handcuffed man, who was being led to a patrol car. We'll need to sort out exactly what his plan was. But based on the evidence, it seems he intended to take her across the border. Rick's stomach churned at the thought. Human trafficking. The phrase alone was enough to make his blood boil. How many others had fallen victim to predators like this man? How many families had been torn apart? He clenched his fists, vowing silently to do whatever he could to prevent such horrors from happening again. This wasn't just about Chloe. It was about every child, every family, every community that deserved to feel safe. As the detective led them toward the station, Rick couldn't shake the image of Chloe, lying unconscious on the gurney, her tiny hand clutching the figurine he'd bought for her. Replayed in his mind, a reminder of how close they'd come to tragedy. Yet amidst the darkness, there was a glimmer of hope, a spark ignited by ordinary people choosing to act when it mattered most. Rick glanced at Margaret, her presence a constant source of strength and love. Together, they had faced the unimaginable and emerged stronger for it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The ride to the station was quiet, the weight of the day settling heavily on both of them. But as they pulled into the parking lot, Rick felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. There were battles left to fight, stories left to tell, and lives left to protect. And if today had taught him anything, it was that heroism wasn't confined to uniforms or titles. Sometimes, it was simply about showing up, standing firm, and refusing to look away. As Rick and Margaret stepped into the police station, the weight of the day's events settled over them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the room filled with officers, typing reports, answering calls, and coordinating logistics. Detective Martinez greeted them warmly, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect. Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson, thank you for coming in. Your statements will help us piece everything together. He gestured toward a small interview room where they could speak privately. Rick recounted the entire ordeal again, this time with more detail. How he'd noticed the girl at Walmart, the unsettling interaction in the toy aisle, the chase to the gas station, and finally, the confrontation that saved Chloe. Margaret chimed in occasionally, adding her perspective as both an observer and supporter. As they spoke, it became clear how close they had come to tragedy. Detective Martinez nodded gravely, jotting notes. You two acted quickly and bravely, he said. This guy wasn't just some random kidnapper. He was part of something bigger. The detective explained that preliminary investigations revealed the man had ties to a human trafficking ring operating near the border. His multiple IDs, prepaid phone, and supplies like duct tape were all red flags. He was planning to smuggle Chloe across the border tonight, Martinez said. If you hadn't intervened when you did. He trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Rick felt a chill run down his spine. They had stopped not just one predator, but potentially dismantled a larger operation. After finishing their statements, Rick and Margaret were invited to join the team in the main briefing area. There, they saw Chloe sitting with her parents, wrapped in blankets and sipping hot chocolate. Her backpack, now adorned with the figurine Rick had bought her, rested beside her feet. She looked up and waved when she spotted him, her smile brighter than before. It was a moment of pure relief, a reminder of why they had risked so much. Chloe's father approached them, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you," he said, shaking Rick's hand firmly. "You gave us our daughter back." Rick shook his head, humbled. "Just take care of her," he replied. "That's all the thanks I need." Chloe's mother handed them a handwritten note, tears streaming down her face. "Please, if there's ever anything we can do for you, let us know." As the night wore on, the police worked tirelessly to gather evidence and coordinate with federal agencies. Rick and Margaret eventually left the station. Exhausted, but fulfilled, the drive home was quiet, each lost in their thoughts. The Texas sky stretched endlessly above them, stars twinkling faintly against the vast darkness. For the first time, in hours, they allowed themselves to breathe deeply, to process what had happened. When they arrived home, Rick helped Margaret out of the car, his movements gentle yet deliberate. Inside, they sat together on the couch, the silence between them comfortable and familiar. "You know," Rick began after a while, "today reminded me of something important." Margaret turned to look at him, her expression curious. "What's that?" she asked softly. "That heroism isn't about grand gestures or being in uniform," Rick continued. "It's about paying attention, trusting your instincts, and stepping up when no one else will." He paused, taking her hand in his. "Today, I realized I still have a purpose. Maybe my battlefield days are over, but there's still work to be done right here, in our community." Margaret smiled, her eyes glistening. "You've always been my hero, Rick. But today, you showed the world what kind of man you are. Strong, brave, and compassionate." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, finding solace in each other's presence. The next morning, news of the rescue spread quickly through Laredo. Local reporters reached out to Rick and Margaret, eager to share their story. At first, Rick hesitated, uncomfortable with the spotlight, but Margaret encouraged him. "People need to hear this," she said. "Not just about what happened, but about the importance of staying vigilant and helping others." Their interview aired on the local news that evening, touching hearts across the city. Viewers praised Rick's quick thinking and courage, while also reflecting on the broader issue of child safety and human trafficking. Inspired by the response, Rick decided to use his platform to raise awareness. He began speaking at community events, sharing his experience, and urging others to trust their instincts and take action when something feels wrong. Months later, Rick received a letter from Chloe's family. Inside was a photo of Chloe smiling brightly, the figurine proudly displayed on her backpack. A note accompanied it. "Thank you for giving us our daughter back. Because of you, she gets to grow up safe and loved. We'll never forget what you did for us." Rick pinned the photo to the fridge, a daily reminder of the impact one person can make. Looking back, Rick knew he couldn't have done it alone. Margaret's unwavering support, Chloe's resilience, and even the kindness of strangers had all played a role in saving the day. Life had thrown them an unexpected challenge, but together they had risen to meet it. And as Rick stood in his kitchen, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise, he felt a profound sense of peace. Retirement hadn't ended his journey. It had simply opened a new chapter, one filled with purpose, connection, and hope.